Okay, awesome. All right. So briefly, this is a landmark study, which is a comparison of machine learning and human predictions to identify trauma patients in need of hemorrhage control resuscitation. And it's a prospective multi-center observational study because as we have identified and is identified in the literature, the time identification of the need for hemorrhage control resuscitation is a challenge in trauma. It's also very clinically important. Delayed recognition leads to delayed blood products. There's studies like Cryostat-2, which demonstrate this, and then also potentially delay in hemorrhage control procedures like IR and OR. We know that these are things which directly influence patient survival. And so that in combination with the fact that there's a risk for inconsistent decision making, which might drive deviations from guidelines and therefore worse outcomes, it becomes even more of an issue when we are trying to make these decisions before the patient arrives, because we're working with limited data that's relayed by EMS. And so there's a little bit more diagnostic uncertainty than there is even in the trauma bay. So the current methods for assessing patient needs in these scenarios are clinical scores and algorithmic flowcharts like shock index. The ABC system is the, as I understand it, the French system, which is similar to the way that we level traumas. So an A would be a patient that is refractory to resuscitation or has persistent severe neurocognitive deficits from their injuries. B is a patient who initially is unstable but is resuscitatable in the field, and then C is a patient who doesn't meet those criteria but has some significant high mechanistic trauma. And so the other issue with our current methods for assessing patient needs, which this is fascinating. We can talk a little bit about Alex, our approach to this, because
I just want to confirm that we're still on the first slide, on the slide.
Oh,
because we're seeing, what I see is the first slide. And we also see the first slide.
I was hesitating, but
no. Okay. Let me just try to share my entire window here.
That's, yeah.
Okay, how's this? Can we see?
No.
My screen? Oh man, all right.
Maybe if you send it to some, maybe if you send it to...
Can you just leave it off, Alex? Can you, whoa, you just, okay. He just jumped up. I think that that's interesting. So I think a couple of things that you're absolutely right. I'm going to ask him just over Slack to send us the things so that I can go through it. And if
well, Alex, he must be so stressed now. If I was him, I would be.
That's funny. Yes.
Okay.
Alexander, don't worry. We've all been there. We've all been in meetings where we were supposed to present, but it doesn't work. So it's we find a solution. Don't worry.
Okay. Thank you for your understanding.
Can
you see this? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll just leave it. We'll go with this. So can we see my slide transitions here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Awesome. All right. So the issues is that the current methods for assessing patient needs are perhaps not optimized. There's an evolution in our understanding of what's important for trauma triage, and some of these metrics are built to predict massive transfusion alone, which when we're thinking about the interventions that are time sensitive and matter for resource deployment, these go beyond just massive transfusion, like warming up a cath lab or activating the OR. And the other issue, which you mentioned that we've encountered, is that the existing machine learning models that are talked about in the literature, they tend to be retrospective. Most of them are single center and or based only on the trauma registry, and then a lot of them are not prospectively tested in a real workflow, and that's another issue because they often incorporate variables that are only available after arrival to the hospital, which of course in our situation where we're focused on prospective deployment is very limiting. And then there's also the element of human ML interaction, which we can talk about. So the goal of this study then is to compare the predictive performance of an ML algorithm versus clinician ability for identifying hemorrhage control resuscitation needs. Do this under real-time, real-world conditions, and the primary hypothesis here was that human and ML would perform comparably. So this was a prospective observational study in 8 level 1 trauma centers in France. The inclusion criteria were pre-hospital trauma team activation, primary admissions, and the primary outcome is a composite binary of any hemorrhage control resuscitation. So getting more than 1 packed RBC in the resuscitation room or the resus room, getting more than 4 units of red blood cells within 6 hours, and then getting any hemorrhage control procedure within 6 hours, or having a death from hemorrhagic shock within 24 hours. So the way that this was implemented was at the pre-alert call, clinicians would enter the pre-hospital predictors into a smartphone app, and then they would provide a percentage of their, how likely they thought the patient was to need a hemorrhage control resuscitation. And then the predictions were time-stamped and then compared to the ML predictions after the fact. And so the ML model was developed based on a previous study, a large cohort of patients, I think around 21,000 observations from a national set, and the variables were selected based on their Shapley value. So the metrics here were appropriate for evaluating ML models, things like sensitivity, specificity, precision, and then notably the F4 score, which I thought was interesting and is better because it weights recall higher. And so that in a trauma-specific situation where we're trying to really minimize our false negatives is an important metric to be evaluating against. And then there's also the combined either positive evaluation where we're taking the greatest common pool of positives between the clinicians and the machine learning model. So this is meant to maximize sensitivity. And then the threshold in this case was set by a group of 20 clinicians. The human ML agreement was evaluated with Cohen's kappa, and then the power was met by the study cohort here. So this was a total of 1,292 observations which were analyzed. They had a hemorrhage control resuscitation need of about 13%. Incidentally, also similar to what we've been seeing in our data sets. And this was a mostly male, median age 35, and mostly, I guess we'd say, moderate acuity cohort, which is also similar to our cohorts. And then of our results comparing human versus the ML methods for prediction, there was not a significant sensitivity difference, which was one of the key findings from the study. And then either positive, so either a human predicted positive for hemorrhage control resuscitation or the ML predicted positive for hemorrhage control resuscitation increased the sensitivity to 83%, with a drop in specificity to 73%. and did provide a net clinical benefit increase of 1 patient per 100. So increasing from 7 patients per 100 correctly identified to 8. And then also notable was the complementary performance difference here. So when clinicians were predicting, they missed 21 cases that the model caught, and then the model missed 20 cases that the clinicians caught. And there was some divergence in the pattern between the false negatives that were produced by both groups. So in the models misses, it tended to be catecholamine or vasopressor use, whereas for the clinicians, it was a penetrating trauma, which you can see here. So the main points of interest when we consider these models and the prospective deployment, which we're very interested to hear about. That's the study that you mentioned at the conclusion of the paper. In when we consider using these models, as they have been deployed in the past for things like breast cancer for computer-assisted detection with radiology, the machine learning doesn't necessarily need to outperform humans to add value if there is a complementary error pattern that can be caught, and this can be used to aid decision awareness. And the optimistic thing here is that we now have a prospective human benchmark for these systems, and the performance that is recorded here does improve over some traditional scores. Things like shock index, and even improvement over in-hospital tools and using pre-hospital data. So that's optimistic that this could be have some utility in a prospective deployment, and namely the benefits that we're expecting to see here are the potential to improve over delays in deployment of resources. So the Cryostat-2 study showed that there's delay in administration of cryoprecipitates. So there, even with awareness, there is still some delay in administration of blood products. And with a 72-minute median lead time, it can be, very useful to know what resources you might need ahead of time. In our system, our contact to hospital arrival time is actually, pretty short. It's around 10, 15, 20 minutes if it's not a transfer, or shorter than that. But in this case, if patients are coming from further away and you have 70 minutes to prepare, that's a pretty significant gain in lead time that you can see. There are some limitations that I think are just inherent to trying to study this sort of a method in a observational setting, and we can kind of touch on those in the discussion. But overall, this is I think a really great evaluation of a robust model that uses routine pre-hospital variables, which are important because we're trying to deploy this sort of thing. Making adjustments in an existing system to collect more data is going to be a lot harder than trying to develop a model based on already present in the chair. And the fact that there's a complementary error pattern is very interesting because that gives more room for improvement over just using a human-centered algorithmic based system for deciding who is at risk of needing a specific intervention. And then again, the thing that we are would love to discuss with you is your randomized trial, which I guess already launched, and also involves looking beyond hemorrhage control resuscitation at things like center-specific injury patterns and neurosurgical needs. So I can pause here, and I also have a few slides talking about some of our work in this area, if that's something we would like to hear.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, how do you want to run this? Do you want us to comment on a specific aspects, or would you like to shoot away with questions? You've sent me some questions in the email, and I have to admit that we ask ourselves the same questions. So it's always reassuring if other groups, other researchers have the same questions. We may not have the answers.
I mean, I think if there's any of those specifically that you think would be interesting to talk about, I know.
Why don't we start just generally? Do you have any kind of general comments among your team that you'd like to make about either the presentation or some after from this presentation?
No, I think it was a very fair presentation and very balanced, and highlighting the also the challenges to perform such a study in a prospective design. And we thought it was very important to start with a let's say naive observation, and to first assess, to have, as you said, a clinical benchmark, a prospective benchmark, because in the literature there is, to my knowledge, not actually a benchmark for clinician performance. And to keep the clinicians, we could have exposed the clinicians to the result of the tool, either after making their own prediction, but we thought it was important to keep them naive, so that there was really no mix. And so we had to come up with a way to be really sure that their own prediction was performed before patient arrival, so hence the timestamp, etc. But that the tool really uses exactly the same information that was available to the clinician at the point of decision making. And yes, of course, there's a particularity of European systems that we have a lot of heads up, which is rather similar across all the European systems, including the UK. So there is time to prepare. And we, for feasibility issues, we put the tool, the data collection tool, with the pre-hospital, not with the pre-hospital team, but with the research team. But this was just for compliance reasons, because we knew that the colleagues that would use this, they would really use it. So now for the prospective trial, and there's as you probably know, the French system is a physician staff pre-hospital system. So here again, our decision for the trial, which has not started yet, and Julie and Dia can witness and ascertain to this challenges to run and get going. So we have to is to have it with the dispatch physician, not with the physician on scene, but we have a dispatch physician, which might be surprising to you. So all these, and hence, of course, compliance will be an issue. So we don't know, but that was why it was positioned in the recess, with the recess team, once they get the heads up.
Maybe I can just add that for us, like this study was one step, and of course, like the next step is the trial. And in fact, in August, I'm going to give a talk at Uncertainty in AI conference, like UAI conference. And so with Dia and Tobias, we have prepared some slides that describe really all the steps to go to the trial, and all the uncertainties that we had to handle. So it goes really from uncertainty in the data and to the challenges of handling missing values in the features, in the outcome, also uncertainty in the prediction, because you are not just going to output a simple, oh, there is a high risk of hemorrhagic shock or no risk. You want to be able to quantify like the uncertainty associated to the prediction. And so we go through all these uncertainties to try to really acknowledge it. And so there are a lot, much more than the first time when Tobias contacted me to say, basically, we have like predictive models, we have missing values. Then because you go through the deployment, you have many things to take into account. And also maybe something that was mentioned in your presentation is that we use variables that are specific to the French system. And so this was really like a lot of discussions. So, okay, we need to use these variables. What do I really want? I want something that generalizes, or do I want something that will be used in the French system? So at the end of the day, the answer was more like to be what can be generalized is a recipe, is all the process, but then there are some choices that needs to be tailored towards your specific context. Otherwise, it has no meaning.
Fantastic. Dia, do you have anything else you want to add, just as some general thoughts?
Yeah. It's from my point of view, I just for context, I joined the team as we were preparing for the next step in the trial, so which is the clinical trial. So regarding the ShockMatrix paper by John Tobias, in saying that my understanding aligned with Alexander's when I first read the paper. Just to also complete Julie's answer, because yes, there are many layers of uncertainty that you go through when you try to deploy such a system, and I will raise one of them that has not yet been mentioned, which is rather the usage uncertainty, in the sense of when you actually deploy these models, even if you have some sort of, you have your sort of like empirical metrics, you have your AUC numbers and so on and so forth, but you actually have no guarantee that that is actually going to shift questions, but also because of the usage shifts between physicians. Because, for example, if your model needs, for example, 9 or 10 variables in order to predict accurately at 0.84 AUC or so on and so forth, some doctors might enter 5 or 4 or so on and so forth. So your actual performance, the performance that the doctors will be getting is not entirely what you put in the paper. So that is a further example regarding to what Julie mentioned regarding there are actually many layers that you run into. They would probably be given more justice if we eventually share Julie's talk regarding this. But yeah, for now, I just wanted to raise that one in particular.
Maybe to complete like the kind of human AI interaction will be easiest to take into account in the trial, because we will compare like human alone versus human plus AI. And so if you think a bit with the counterfactual reasoning, you can also kind of try to predict the AI alone. So this will be like analysis that we will do using the data that we will collect to really kind of compare like human AI, and AI alone, and just with some kind of causal reasoning to try to infer it from the data. So this will be super. I'm super excited about it.
So because what we will do in the trial is conceived to be a clinical trial. So where we test the outcome is the reduction of the level of under triage, and not the performance of the model or any. So there's of course, and the clinicians will be free to choose. So they will have the prediction, and as Dia says, which is very important, they will also have a level of uncertainty of the model, but they will be free to choose. This is again practical or pragmatic reasons. Because although we have a national triage system, all the networks are not completely homogeneous, or the centers are completely homogeneous, so that you can say you have X percentage of hemorrhagic shock or neurosurgery need for neurosurgery, you have to send them to a level 1 center, because the networks are so heterogeneous and the level of structure is so heterogeneous that the dispatch physician level of freedom to decide what is the most appropriate institution he will send the patient to. So hence we could not impose a destination so that they will be free. So this, to just reflect what Julie says, we don't, the machine learning tool will not impose a destination, will not impose a facility to them. But this would also, is also probably, we would have been, this is also a regulatory issue. So we, for example, for our FDA, the code of our FDA, we managed to go through the radar of a medical device, because this is, there's so they accepted us to be some, and if we would have come through as a medical device, regulation would have been much more difficult. And the next reason is that acceptability. Although clinicians are curious to test this, and we had a great compliance with this study and very great feedback also in terms of use of the interface, and DIA has made, we had, the interface was phone-based, the one we use in ShockMatrix. Now the interface we have now is a web app, and DIA has made an amazing work, and I don't know whether Julie or DIA will agree to share the prototype link, but hence again, practical feasibility, it's not, it doesn't require any installation or download. People can just to the website. So it's really, the idea is that it's not disruptive for the workflow. It takes them a minute to fill out. They have the result immediately. They're on the phone. They have tons of information. Their cognitive load is really high. So this must be as less disruptive as possible for their workflow, and no installation, because you have, it will be deployed in 16 dispatch centers across France, and they all have a different software. They don't. So the idea to integrate it into some software, it's not feasible, because of course there is an observation bias, because they will have to type in that's as it did. So, but it's an observation bias. You have of what they think, and does this actually improve triage, because it allows some cognitive benchmark against something that is always the same output, even at 3 in the morning, even if it's the 10th dispatch they have in the day. So that's more the, but of course there's lots of compromise, but due to practical reasons and feasibility issues.
Alex, do you have so
Sure.
do you have any big question you want to get through?
Yeah, I mean, the missingness, question is, I think it comes up a lot, and it's I guess a slightly more background. I'm doing a data science degree now, and so I've kind of been exposed in my classes to different ways to deal with missingness. So rather than like thinking about using like KNN imputation, or like using term level, but I think that there's the issue of how to handle that best. And I think that that's probably going to differ, between our systems, because like I love that you have, physician staff DMS and a physician dispatcher. I can tell you that like what we're using as a pre-hospital data source comes from EMS crews, and occasionally the emergency department is coordinating them prior to arrival. And so sometimes the emergency department physicians will ask for additional data, but a lot of times we're missing key variables like GCS, which we know is super important, is very, very infrequently reported. A lot of times we'll get non-clinically validated ways for reporting mental status, and so it's hard to kind of distill that into a structured variable. So I'm just wondering, like, with your system, kind of what patterns of missingness did you encounter? How did you handle that? Like, did that affect your variable selection? I looked at the, in the paper and your supplemental materials, it described that, but I'm imagining that your full data source was extensive. So I'm just curious at what thoughts you have on that.
I can go. I can do it. Like, yes, first when Tobias contacted me, it was because of missing values, because for some variables to 5% of missing values, a small set of course, so it's like a huge. And in fact, what was interesting in the trauma base is that the medical doctor have decided to encode it the cause of missingness. So we had like a lot of different codes, maybe too much, like not using the statistical terminology. But sometimes it was written impossible because the state of the patient was such that it was impossible to take the measurement. So you feel that it is kind of informative missing values. Sometimes it was just like not available because it was not available. They have not filled the form because a lot of things are filled after, in fact, happened. And so you get this kind of missing values that you feel that you do not need to handle in the same way, you know. So it was like a starting point of a lot of discussions. It turned out that when you have missing values, depending on your statistical aim, the method to deal with missing values will be different. So for instance, if you do classical statistics, like you do a logistic regression, you want to estimate logistic regression parameters, you can go for multiple imputation. It will be perfect, be adapted. But the theory for supervised learning with missing values, if I really want to have like a predictive model with missing values, in fact, to handle missing values, you can go for very simple strategies like imputation with the mean. In fact, it's completely well from a kind of theoretical point of view. It will be consistent if your aim is to be able to, okay, I want a predictive model that predict as well as possible, despite the fact that I can have missing values, and that I will have missing values at the train time and at the test time. Because from a kind of statistical point of view, like the what is called the Bayes predictor, so the optimal thing that you can do is one model per pattern of missing values. So if you are rich with infinite data, you will need to create one model when you have only one features observed, one model when you have two features observed, and so on. And by kind of imputing by a mean, in a way, it mimics this. It's kind of a code for missing values. You just say, okay, there is a missing values. And so it kinds of learning different models depending on the pattern of missing values. So there are theoretical papers to state that you can do it. The only problem is that, of course, it's asymptotic results. So it means that you need to have a lot of data to trust into these simple methods. And so that's why beyond prediction with missing values, I can say, okay, impute with the mean. And in fact, no matter if my missing values are informative or non-informative, this can work. But I absolutely need to quantify the uncertainty associated to the prediction. Intuitively, if we have less data, maybe I will trust a bit less the prediction. So I need to kind of combine simple imputation for predictive model plus putting some kind of intervals to show if I am confident or not. So basically, it was simple because it's only for this predictive objective. If I do descriptive statistics analysis, I use other methods. And maybe there are some missing values that we need to handle by recoding. Just because it's not a missing values, it's just like a coding issues. Like for instance, if my patients have pupils anomaly, yes or no. If yes, then I do other test. If no, I do not do the other test. And this is not real missing values in the sense that I don't want to impute something. There is no underlying value that exists. It's just a matter of recoding. So maybe I can recode these variables are like pupils anomaly, yes, and then test A, test B, and no. And then I have three categories. So there are some missing values that we have handled in this way because it's not really missing values. And the real missing values for predictive model, we can do a simple imputation plus uncertainty quantification. I hope this is clear. And I can
no, that's awesome.
Okay. And I can give you the pointers. And this is where I have spent my time saying to people, never, it's the worst thing that you can do, basically. And this is the worst thing that you can do when you do not, you do something else than prediction. For prediction, this is fine. If you use like complicated models, at least like random forest or XGBoost or this kind of things.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question as it relates to one of the they're kind of tied to each other. There's an assumption that by providing uncertainty, that somehow the people that are then working with the results are going to somehow be able to use that in a meaningful way. And so there's an assumption that we make as well, that that's the case, that somehow uncertainty quantification allows us to make better decisions, because by knowing that uncertainty, we know how much to trust the model. But the question of what the actual dose response between the uncertainty and the amount of trust to provide is an unclear one. But this also ties into a broader problem, which we get asked a lot, which is when you say human plus AI, human is not a monolith. Human is actually, from medical student to physician with 20 years experience to everything else. And so there's not only uncertainty on the model side, there's also uncertainty on the side of the receptor. And one of the things that I'm curious is how you think about that, because we run into this problem constantly when thinking about model building. If your ML model is variable, at least the uncertainty around it is variable, and your receptor is going to receive it in variable, thinking about the entire interaction.
That's great, because I love this, and I think the same. But I have a clinician perspective, but maybe I'll let Julie and Dia answer first.
Or Dia, you can just maybe explain what you have done, like at least to consider how the people are in terms of metrics evaluations. And maybe you do not see what I mean. Yes.
Yeah. There are multiple layers to this, where what Julie just mentioned is more so in regarding to how our model evaluations will be interpreted by the clinician, given that the clinician will follow the AI's advice fully without hesitation. So regarding this, yes, we can discuss regarding the other side, where the clinician himself is variable. That is a can of worms, in the sense of, and with Julie and Tobias, we also have looked at, our AI models are trained on historic data that capture clinician practices. And like you mentioned, Gabriel, like our clinician practices are like can differ between an intern to a 20-year veteran. So the AI is already trained on a massive amount of heterogeneous practices, and when we predict something, is that really what is clinically beneficial for the patient? So there is one can of worms that I'll maybe leave up to Julie and Tobias. However, to touch up a bit regarding what Julie mentioned earlier, I will share my screen here just so that I can show you proper evaluations of, so that the idea would be more clear. Here, do you guys see my screen?
Yes, it's exactly this that I was mentioning. But maybe we very we are, I think, out of time.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, our idea of I will go very quickly. Yeah, our idea of how to measure uncertainty is to basically classify model. I will just grab the slide that shows this. The methodology. Yeah. Basically, to classify model predictions rather in a binary outcome into a 5-tier outcome based on how confident we are in the prediction. Either we are fully negative, we are not confident that it's negative, we are not confident at all, we are not confident it's positive, and fully positive. And the idea is that each of these things can be taken into account by the clinician in a different manner, where maybe they're more likely to just take positive and confidently positive and confidently negative into account, or maybe take into account negative and weakly confident negative, into account, so on for positives only, and not take into account only uncertain. In all cases, they can't.
But
And the
maybe
idea is that
the people who, when they see the model say I don't know, like they are not going to take any risk, and so you know that maybe they are going to predict like, okay, maybe there is an hemorrhagic shock or a need for neurosurgery. So depending, so basically we can try depending on how the medical doctor does not want to take risk and or follow the app. We have tried to do this, so maybe you can continue.
Yeah, exactly. So our first.
Did I understand just so that I'm clear?
Sure.
You're saying that there is guidance for them around that, for example, like what is, or there isn't guidance. So, because
there is guidance.
Regarding how to interpret the results, that can be variable. So we don't express contradictions or so on and so forth.
No, if it's positive, we don't know what they will do, basically.
There is guidance. There is guidance, but we don't know how they will use the guidance. That's the truth. And we have decided for again practicality reasons not to dive into this because of the time constraint. And but we will, I hope we have to include about 4,300 patients. I hope that we will see what Leah just described, that do they will there have enough observations to see whether there is a pattern with the level of confidence of how they decide and the level of uncertainty? So would they tend really to agree with the model when it's really obvious more often, or do they? But that's completely hypothetical. My take is that when we have assessed this with clinicians and we show them the interface and we ask them what you would like to see, etc., that the most would actually, even those that are trained in statistics or have some basic data science knowledge, that they would just like to have something yes or no, actually.
Right, because the one of the interesting questions around that is, if it's not yes or no, are you actually reducing cognitive load? Right.
Yeah, totally. So we might increase the confusion, definitely.
Obviously, the issue, I assume, is you can't do yes or no, as you said, because there's not only is it an ease of presentation, it's also there's where do you set the threshold? What are the compliance issues around saying yes or no, being proscriptive as opposed to presenting risk predictions? I assume that those are several of the things that made you ultimately decide to present it in this way.
Yeah, and keep in mind again that the clinician is absolutely free to decide whatever he or she wants. So if they go against the model, then be it.
Super interesting. I want to be respectful of, because Alex has done a lot of work. Alex, do you have any other big question you want to go over? And then we'll let our amazing colleagues let them go after this. Do you have any other question you want to? Because I have 1,000 questions I have.
Yeah.
There are 1,000 questions in part because the work that you've done is wonderful because it brings two areas that we think about a lot. One is how do we about pre-hospital. Our direction has been to try to, because we don't have the physician-led system that you have, we've focused on trying to automate EMS call-in data. So can we actually use the audio and pull that data from the audio to build predictive models, which with much more missingness than the one that you're describing, I assume. But then at this other hand, we also do a good deal of research thinking about physician intuition. And so the work that you've done has done an incredible job of kind of bringing those two and figuring out how to build an AI/ML interface that is actually useful at the point of care, which is, obviously quite a feat. And so we can definitely go on for hours, but I want to make sure that Alex has an opportunity to ask one last question before we adjourn.
Sure. I guess the one thing which I thought was interesting from again, like more of a clinician interaction psychology approach was asking people to give a percentage likelihood of the how likely they thought a patient was to need a HCR, because like as a data scientist, that makes clearly the most sense, because then you can do all sorts of metric comparisons. And we're actually working with we have an older data set where we had physicians just give a binary yes or no prediction. And then, of course, you only have one operating point, but it's also the operating point that people probably would most likely to settle on with their intuition. So what is your, did you consider these, and like, what did you think the drawback trade-off was for either one of these?
The drawback, you mean to have them quantify their estimation?
Mm-hmm.
So we asked them to in ShockMatrix, we asked them to quantify their estimation, but at 4 levels. We do this again. It's supposed again to be in the trial. So, but it's not quantified. It's a 4 class level. What is the level of confidence in their own prediction? We also assessed, by the way, the level we initially. Some colleagues that are not, unfortunately, here, they wanted to know what is the confidence of the clinicians into the information they have received, and does this actually influence their appreciation of the situation? And we couldn't see any, so we couldn't see any link with that in our data set. So no matter what their level of confidence in the information they were given was, there was no link to the performance, to the predictive performance. So we dropped this for the trial to make it easier.
Interesting.
And also, no, we didn't see any link between experience and prediction. Actually, the most senior clinicians, including me, probably, they were the worst.
Why do you think that is? And like, what is it that and I don't consider myself, or I guess I am a senior clinician at this point, but why do you think there is that finding? Because I think that finding is not at all surprising to me.
Of course, it must be. There were not so many senior clinicians. I can't recall how we stratified experience over I think it was more than 10 years being a research room team leader. Probably it's just maybe an coincidence that they were rather bad. Maybe it was also there was a selection bias, because maybe they were more less senior colleagues were actually inclined to use the tool for various reasons, or they were less inclined to actually expose themselves to some sort of benchmarking. And then probably also overconfidence, just like being, but I don't know. No, this is all hypothetical. We didn't have enough observations to really dig into this.